In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an easy skirt. I made mine in sheer, so it's more of a beach cover-up, but you can use any fabric you like. For this project, you're going to need scissors, pins, measuring tape, thread, elastic. I used a picot elastic, optional bows, and fabric. For the fabric, I went with something sheer, non-stretch, and lightweight, but you can really choose any type of fabric you like. We're going to start by taking 3 measurements. The first measurement is going to be measuring the circumference of where you want your skirt to lie. Second, we're going to measure the largest part of your hips. And then the third measurement, we're going to measure the length that we'd like for the skirt, remembering to start where we decided we want our skirt to lie. So here's a drawing of the skirt that we're going to be making. It's going to have 3 panels in the front with a gathered hem, and then 3 panels in the back. And it's going to be asymmetric with an elastic waistband. I'm going to walk you through these measurements and how to create our pattern. It's going to take a little bit of math, but we're going to take our largest hip measurement, so the large waist measurement, and divide that by 6, which is how many panels we're going to create. We're going to take that measurement and add 2 centimeters seam allowance. And then it's up to you to determine how much flare you want for the bottom of your skirt. I ended up adding 10 centimeters to the bottom of my skirt to add that much more flare, but this pattern allows you to play around and add as much or as little as you like. When creating patterns, fabric can also play a big part in the way your garment lies, so it's important to make a test version of whatever it is that you're making out of a cheaper but similar fabric. So now we have our 3 sides measured out. We have our length, including the 2 centimeter seam allowance. We have the top of the skirt and the flared bottom part of the skirt. Again, both of these including seam allowance. We're now ready to cut the actual version of the pattern. So using the measurements that we just took, we're going to cut that piece out. If you don't have any paper, you can mark these measurements onto a piece of scrap fabric, or you can just use the measurements and your measuring tape and pin the measurements directly onto the fabric. As you can see, this gives you the exact same measurements as if you were to do it on paper. Once you have your first piece cut out, you can use that piece as a stencil and then continue cutting until you have 6 pieces. As you can see, I'm cutting all of my pieces on the bias, meaning that there's going to be a diagonal stretch to the fabric. This is up to you, and it's just a way that I like to create a little more movement in my garments. With all 6 pieces now cut out, we're ready to place them right sides together and pin them. Make sure that when you're attaching your pieces, you're lining up the wider end of the skirt pieces with the other wider ends and the narrow ends with the other narrow ends. You're going to continue pinning until you have all 6 pieces attached and your skirt is formed. You're then going to sew along where you just pinned with a straight stitch. If your fabric frays or just for a cleaner finish, you can trim away any of the excess fabric on the outside of the seam and then go over this with a zigzag stitch. You want to make sure that when you're doing the zigzag stitch that your needle is going over the side of the fabric. This will help lock in any extra threads. We're now ready to measure out our elastic. So we're going to use the measurement that we took for where we want our skirt to lie. Before we cut, we also want to make sure that we're adding enough to make sure that we can sew the 2 ends together. You can also test this measurement by just wrapping the elastic around your waist and see where it lies comfortably. We're then going to sew the 2 ends together with a zigzag stitch. With our elastic now done, we're ready to attach it to the top of our skirt. So you're going to place the right side of your elastic on the right side of your fabric, and if you have a design on your elastic, you want that facing down. So again, we're going to attach the right side of the elastic on the right side of the fabric, all around the top edge of the skirt. We're going to do this with a zigzag stitch, pulling the elastic slightly so that it fits all the way around the edge of the skirt. If any of the fabric is poking through, we want to cut that before we do our second stitch. For the second stitch, we're just going to fold the elastic over and then do a top stitch on the right side of the fabric, again using a zigzag stitch, and pulling the elastic slightly. You've now finished the waistband. The next step, we're going to move on to the hem. Referring back to the drawing, I'm going to do an asymmetric hem, but you can do any type of hem you like. So I'm going to start by just trimming away the shape that I'd like for my new hem, and keeping in mind I'm going to be adding a little extra length when I add the ruffled edge. If you don't have a mannequin, make sure that you try the skirt on during this part to ensure that you're not cutting it too short. Now, using your measuring tape, you're going to measure out the circumference of the hem. This measurement is going to be used now for cutting out the ruffled hem. When cutting out your ruffle, you need to determine how much gathering you'd like for this piece. It can be 1.5, 2, or even 3 times the amount of the length that you measured. Another area we can play around with this skirt is what kind of details, lace, bows, ribbons that we'd like to add. But moving back to the gathered hem, we're going to take the piece that we just cut, and with the largest stitch that we have on our machine, we're going to sew along the edge of the fabric, making sure not to do a back stitch. The reason for no back stitch is because now we can tug on the loose string and create the gather. And this is where the amount of gathering is up to you. So I like to test on a smaller piece before I cut the actual length and width that I'd like for my hem. So I can now take that piece, place it right sides together on the hem of my skirt, and sew it together with a straight stitch. This is what a 1.5 times the length gathering looks like, and I think I'm going to do that for my actual skirt. And now it's time to hem the gathered hem. You can do this by attaching lace, doing a zigzag stitch, or a small rolled over hem. I decided to do a zigzag stitch and a small rolled over hem, and I find this the easiest thing to do with chiffons. As you can see here, it gives it a very clean finish, or this is just the zigzag stitch. If you decided to finish your skirt with a lace hem, you could just do that with a top stitch. I find the rolled over zigzag stitch the cleanest. So here's my final skirt in my real fabric with all my added details. And you're all done! Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please subscribe.